The stars were silent that night, or so it seemed. But silence was not emptiness. It was waiting, waiting for something no one had expected. Far across the void, the Cathari Empire moved like a dark storm. Their ships were enormous, black as night, with engines that burned brighter than suns. They had conquered worlds, enslaved species, and crushed rebellions without mercy. Nothing had ever stopped them. Nothing, except the humans. On Earth, people looked up at the sky with curiosity, not fear. Children pointed at the stars, dreaming of what might be out there. Scientists calculated distances and watched movements in the heavens. No one imagined that among those endless lights, a storm of darkness was approaching. A storm that would shake humanity to its core. The first signals came as small blips on observatory screens. At first, they seemed harmless. Satellites sending strange patterns, nothing unusual. But when military radar caught massive objects moving at impossible speeds toward Earth, alarms rang. Across every continent, humans stopped. They stared. They did not know what was coming. But something deep in their instincts told them. This was bigger than anything they had faced. The Cathari were arrogant, confident in their supremacy. When they entered Earth's orbit, they did not send greetings. They sent commands. Bow and you may live. Resist and be destroyed. Their message was cold, unfeeling, meant to break the will of a small, fragile species. The Cathari expected nothing but submission. They thought humans would shake, would cry, would surrender. But humans did not. Across every city, village, and town, people paused. They looked up at the great ships, black and shining, moving like giants over their cities. And instead of bowing, they watched. They waited. No one ran. No one screamed. Their silence was not weakness. It was determination. It was the first sign that the Cathari had made a terrible mistake. The first encounter began when a Cathari scout ship approached New York City. The humans had no fleet, no powerful shields, no weapons to match. Yet the people did not scatter. Emergency responders, soldiers, scientists, and civilians all acted as one. Evacuation routes were organized. Civilian drones helped guide people to safety. Engineers modified small aircraft into emergency defense craft. Mothers clutched children, whispering promises of safety. Fathers stood tall even when their hearts were pounding. They had nothing but courage, but it was enough to surprise the invaders. For the Cathari, it was baffling. They had studied countless species before, and they knew what fear looked like. It was in the trembling, the begging, the surrender. But humans did not act like that. When the first warning shots hit, humans did not flee. They yelled. They rallied. They fought back with whatever they could find. Old jets, small missiles, even homemade explosives. They were fragile, yes. Mortal, yes. But they were unbroken. The commander of the Cathari fleet watched through the observation lens, his mandibles twitching in disbelief. They do not fear us, he muttered. They do not run. Why do they not run? He could not understand. For him it was impossible. Every species before this had cowered. Every species had fallen. But not these humans. Their eyes burned with something ancient, something no scanner could measure, something he had never encountered. And that was when it happened. Across the world, tiny sparks of resistance flared. In New York and Paris and Beijing, in every corner of the earth, humans rose. Not as armies, not as soldiers, but as people who refused to die quietly. They were fragile, yes, but fragile did not mean weak. They were alive, and they were determined to remain so. The Cathari had come expecting surrender. They came expecting fear. Instead, they found defiance. And the first day of the invasion ended with a realization that would haunt the empire forever. Humans were nothing like any species they had ever faced. Something in their hearts, something in their souls made them impossible to break. And the storm had only just begun. The Cathari Empire had made a mistake. A small mistake, but one that would grow into a storm they could not control. They thought they understood humans. Their data said Earth was weak, primitive, unorganized. A tiny world with no advanced fleet, no powerful weapons, no shield strong enough to stop a single Cathari cruiser. To them, humans were ants, fragile and insignificant. But the Cathari had never met ants like these. When the first Cathari warship fired on a human city, expecting instant surrender, humans did not break. They screamed, yes, they screamed, but not in fear. They screamed in anger. They screamed for their homes, for their families, for the right to live another day. And they fought back. Even with scraps, with old tanks and small aircraft, humans fought. They improvised, they learned, they adapted faster than the Cathari had predicted. Across the world, the same scene repeated. In Tokyo, a group of engineers rerouted power from a hospital to fuel defense turrets. In London, civilians trapped in underground stations turned subway cars into moving barricades. In Rio, fishermen built floating platforms armed with missiles taken from old military stockpiles. Every human, every group, every child who could lift a hand joined the fight. The Cathari did not understand it. They had never seen a species grow stronger when pushed to the edge. The Empire's commanders began to argue. They had expected fear, compliance, and surrender. Instead, they faced determination. "This species," one commander said, his voice trembling, "they do not behave like any we have conquered. Their fear does not control them. Their weakness becomes strength." But the Cathari were stubborn. They increased their attacks. Cities burned, forests turned to ash, oceans were scarred with debris from falling warships. They believed that destruction would finally crush human will. It did not. Humans adapted to destruction. They rebuilt. They shared food, water, and medicine, even when there was almost nothing to give. They taught one another, inspired one another, carried each other when the pain was too much. Even soldiers who had fought in the galaxy for centuries began to whisper in fear. The Cathari had faced countless uprisings, rebellions, wars, but nothing like this. This was not just resistance. This was something deeper, something impossible to predict. The humans' courage was not blind. They knew they could die at any moment. Entire cities had fallen. Millions were already gone. And yet they did not surrender. Every loss only strengthened them. Each scar, each tear, each broken street carried a message: we will not fall. Not yet. Not ever. In a secret Cathari meeting, the Empire's leaders debated. "They are weak," one insisted. "They will break eventually." But another commander shook his head. "No," he said. "They are not weak. Weakness does not rise from ruins. Weakness does not turn scraps into weapons. Weakness does not stare at giants and smile with anger in their eyes." Across the globe, humans were changing. They were learning the language of the enemy. They studied the wrecks of Cathari ships, copied their technology, and improved upon it. They discovered flaws even in machines no other species could repair. The humans were clever, unpredictable, and relentless, and their courage inspired one another. Even the smallest victories brought hope to the hopeless. Even the faintest spark became a fire in their hearts, and the Cathari, they were afraid. The first real fear the Empire had ever known crept into their hearts. They had conquered countless worlds, destroyed countless species, and toppled empires. But they had never faced a species that could fight with nothing but hope, courage, and love for one another. A species whose very survival depended on their unity. A species whose hearts burned brighter than the guns that tried to destroy them. And in that fear, the first cracks appeared in the Cathari's confidence. For the first time, they realized they had underestimated humans. They had assumed weakness meant defeat. They had assumed survival would be easy. But they were wrong. Very, very wrong. The humans were not weak. The humans were something far more dangerous. Something the Empire had never faced before. Something unstoppable. And the galaxy would soon learn what the Cathari had failed to understand. No one could predict what humans would do. Until it was too late. The humans were rising. Not as one army, not as one nation, but as a species united in fear, courage, and determination. The Cathari had expected quick surrender. They had expected cities to fall, people to beg, the world to kneel. But what they found was the opposite. Across every continent, humanity lit a fire the Empire could not understand. In the ruined streets of New York, survivors organized themselves. Engineers fixed broken vehicles, scientists built makeshift weapons, and ordinary people, shopkeepers, teachers, children, found strength they did not know they had. They learned quickly. Every tactic the Cathari used against them was studied, analyzed, and countered. Humans were slow at first, yes, but every failure taught them something new. They were relentless, and every small victory strengthened their hearts. In Europe, the same story unfolded. Londoners dug tunnels to protect themselves from orbital bombardments. Farmers in France and Germany turned fields into traps, placing explosives where the enemy would least expect. Entire villages became small fortresses. No one had ever seen humans work together like this. Neighbors who had argued over petty things now shared food, water, and hope. Families who had been broken came together again. They were alive and they refused to be crushed. The Cathari were shocked. They had faced species that fought with weapons, with strength, with fear. But humans fought with something else, something raw and wild. They fought with love for one another, with a stubborn refusal to accept defeat. And in that love, in that unity, humans became more dangerous than the largest fleet in the empire. In the skies above Tokyo, a squadron of human pilots took off in patched-together jets, facing a Cathari cruiser that dwarfed them in size and power. Every pilot knew the odds, they would die. But death did not stop them. They flew with precision. They attacked with ingenuity. They risked everything for the chance to protect those below. One by one, they struck critical systems of the enemy ship. Explosions lit the sky and the massive cruiser was forced to retreat. The humans had won, against impossible odds. Even in small towns and villages, humans did not surrender. Children helped carry supplies to soldiers. Farmers hid people from Cathari patrols. Doctors risked their lives to save anyone they could. Every act, no matter how small, sent a message to the Empire. We will not bow. We will not break. We will not die quietly. The Cathari commanders grew frustrated. How can a species so small resist so fiercely? One demanded. They should fear us. They should obey. They should be crushed by our power. Another shook his head. They do not fear death. They do not fear pain. They do not fear loss. They draw strength from it. Across the galaxy, whispers began. Word of humans' defiance spread to other worlds. Even among species the Cathari had conquered. They watched as humans survived strikes that would have destroyed entire civilizations. They watched as humans rebuilt faster than anyone could predict. And they began to wonder what made humans so different. It was not weapons. It was not technology. It was something no scanner could measure, no weapon could destroy. It was the fire in their hearts, the love for one another, the hope that no darkness, no destruction, no empire could extinguish. And on Earth that fire grew. Across deserts, forests, oceans, and cities, humanity rose again and again. Every failure became a lesson. Every loss became fuel. Every scream of pain became a call to fight harder. They were not just surviving, they were becoming stronger. For the Cathari, it was terrifying. They had conquered millions of species. They had crushed rebellions before they even began. But humans were different. They could not be measured. They could not be predicted. And every victory against them seemed only to make them stronger. The first spark of defiance had grown into a flame, and the flame was spreading. Across the world, across every city and every battlefield, humans were proving one thing. They were not fragile. They were not weak. They were alive, they were united, and they were ready to fight. And the Cathari, for the first time in their long empire, realized something they had never expected. Humans were not a species to be conquered. Humans were a force that could not be stopped. And that force had only just begun to awaken. The first true victory came not from numbers, not from technology, but from courage. It happened above Mars in the silent red deserts that had once seemed empty. The Cathari sent 3 massive cruisers to crush the human resistance in space. Their weapons glowed like suns. Their shields were stronger than anything humanity had ever faced. Most species would have surrendered before a single shot was fired, but not humans. The fleet that answered was small, patched together from Earth's limited technology. Some ships had hulls welded from old space stations. Some ran on engines scavenged from satellites. Weapons were repaired, modified, and sometimes homemade. The Cathari commander laughed when he saw the fleet, confident that the humans would die without even touching the enemy. He thought victory would be easy, but the humans had something the Cathari could not measure: ingenuity, courage, and a refusal to surrender. The battle began with explosions that lit the dark skies of Mars. The Cathari fired with precision, destroying several human ships instantly. Smoke and fire filled the void. For a moment it seemed like the humans would be crushed, but instead of retreating, they adapted. Pilots dodged unpredictably, weaving through debris and fire. Engineers remotely hacked enemy systems, causing small disruptions that grew into chaos. One human ship, nearly destroyed, rammed a Cathari cruiser at full speed. Explosions ripped through the massive hull and alarms rang across the Empire's fleet. Another ship fired its last missile, striking the cruiser's engine core. A bright flash lit the space above Mars as the cruiser spiraled out of control. The Cathari commander could not believe what he saw. "Impossible," he muttered. How do they survive?" Every tactic they had prepared seemed to fail. Every prediction had been wrong. Humans were turning scraps into weapons, weakness into strength. Every loss made them stronger, sharper, faster. On the ground, Earth watched through live feeds. People cheered in the streets. Children hugged their parents. Soldiers cried quietly, overwhelmed by hope. It was not a perfect victory. Many human ships had been destroyed. But it was a victory nonetheless. And it was proof that humans could fight giants and live. Across the Cathari fleet, whispers spread among the officers. "They adapt too fast. They are unpredictable. They are dangerous." For the first time, the empire that had never known fear began to feel it. They had assumed humans would be crushed in a single attack. They had assumed obedience would come with intimidation. Instead, humans had shown them something terrifying, determination that could not be broken. The human success inspired even those not on the battlefield. Scientists in underground labs worked harder, designing new ways to counter the enemy. Civilians sent food and supplies to spaceports. Soldiers repaired ships that seemed beyond repair. Every small effort became part of the greater fight, a testament to the unity that the Cathari could not understand. The battle above Mars ended with 2 Cathari cruisers destroyed, and the third fleeing in disarray. It was the first time the Empire had lost a major battle to humans, and it shook their confidence. Across their fleet, commanders began to doubt themselves. Their perfect strategy had failed. Their superior technology had been defeated. And the humans, they were still standing. The human pilots returned to Earth battered, exhausted, and grieving for those lost but victorious. They were not heroes in the stories of old. They were ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And their victory sent a clear message to the galaxy. Humans were alive, humans were united, and humans were not to be underestimated. Even in the Cathari command chambers, fear grew. For the first time in centuries, they faced a species that did not fear death, that turned weakness into power, that fought with everything they had simply because they refused to surrender, and the humans knew this. Above Mars, in the cold emptiness of space, humanity had lit a spark that would grow into a flame, a spark that would remind the galaxy of one undeniable truth. The human spirit could not be broken, and the Cathari, mighty, powerful, and cruel, would learn this lesson the hardest way possible. The Cathari had expected to crush humanity quickly. They had thought Earth was just another weak world, another species to dominate. But after the defeat above Mars, everything changed. The humans were no longer a species to be measured, no longer a species to underestimate. They were a force, messy, chaotic, unpredictable, but unstoppable. Across Earth, preparations intensified. Cities rebuilt overnight. Farms turned into supply centers. Factories that had once made mundane goods now produced weapons and parts for spacecraft. Scientists worked tirelessly, studying every fallen Cathari ship to understand its technology. Engineers modified these designs, building new ships faster and smarter than anyone thought possible. Every day, humanity grew stronger. Every loss became a lesson, every failure a step toward victory. Soldiers on the front lines began to notice something remarkable. The humans were fearless, not because they were reckless, but because they had something no Cathari could ever understand. They fought for each other, for their families, for their friends, for strangers they had never met. Each life mattered. Every act of courage inspired another, and every human who fell became a symbol, not of defeat but of determination. In space, small human fleets struck again and again. They ambushed Cathari patrols, sabotaged supply lines, and used traps in ways the Empire had never imagined. Some attacks seemed desperate, almost suicidal, but humans had a way of turning desperation into advantage. One fleet even used a collapsing asteroid field to hide from a massive cruiser and destroy it from inside, a move no Cathari tactician had predicted. The Cathari commanders grew frantic. Their strategies, tested across hundreds of worlds, failed again and again. They had studied countless civilizations, but humans learned faster than any algorithm could predict. Every weakness they exposed was immediately reinforced. Every failure was repaired, and humans encouraged one another, celebrated small victories, and mourned losses with dignity before continuing the fight. On Earth, The civilian population played a crucial role. Children sent coded messages. Teachers organized logistics. Farmers grew food to feed soldiers and survivors. Even artists and writers helped, creating messages of hope that spread through every corner of the planet. The humans were not just fighting a war, they were creating a culture of resilience, a force the Cathari could not destroy with weapons alone. And yet, the Empire kept coming. Larger fleets, deadlier weapons, more destructive tactics. They believed sheer power would finally break humanity. But with each strike, humans adapted faster. They learned, they resisted, they survived. Humanity was no longer just defending. They were attacking. They began to push back, reclaiming territory, sabotaging enemy supply chains, and striking the Cathari where they least expected. One Cathari soldier, captured during a skirmish, whispered to his commander, They do not fight like any species I have known. Even when we destroy their cities, they rise again. Even when we take their people, they do not kneel. They are alive in a way I cannot understand. That was the truth. Humans were alive, not just in body, but in spirit. Their courage, their unity, their hope, it was more powerful than any weapon the Cathari had. The galaxy had never seen a species like this. Every loss the humans suffered became fuel. Every scar became a story of strength. Every tear became a spark of fire. And slowly, imperceptibly at first, the tide began to turn. The Cathari were no longer the unstoppable force. The humans, once thought fragile and weak, were pushing back. They were cleverer, faster, more adaptable. Their defiance inspired fear in the Empire, fear the Cathari had not felt in centuries. The turning tide was more than military victories. It was hope spreading across the stars. The humans were not just surviving, they were living, fighting, and thriving. And the Empire, so long confident in its power, began to realize something terrifying. The humans would not stop. They could not stop, and nothing in the galaxy could prepare the Cathari for what would come next. Humanity had begun to rise, and the Empire was finally beginning to understand the truth. The humans were not weak. They were not fragile. They were alive. And alive meant unstoppable. The Cathari had faced countless species, empires, and rebellions over thousands of years. They had crushed planets, enslaved populations, and erased civilizations without a second thought. They believed they understood power. They believed fear could bend any species to their will. But humans were proving them wrong. The revelation came slowly, painfully, as the Cathari studied the humans in battle after battle. Every attack they launched, every strategy they tried seemed to fail. Humans adapted faster than the Empire could predict. Small fleets took down larger warships. Makeshift weapons disabled advanced systems. Civilians, farmers, teachers, children helped in ways the Cathari had never seen. The humans were clever, resourceful, and relentless, but the true revelation was not in their weapons or their tactics. It was in their hearts. The Cathari could destroy cities, flatten forests, and even obliterate whole populations. They could kill countless humans at a time, yet still, humanity rose again. They did not surrender. They did not give in. They did not lose hope. For the first time in the long history of the Empire, the Cathari realized something terrifying. Humans fought not for conquest, not for glory, not even for survival alone. They fought for each other. Every life mattered. Every loss inspired more courage, not despair. Every tear, every scar, every heartbreak became fuel for their resistance. Humans drew strength from love, from hope, from unity, and the Cathari had no weapon that could match it. In a secret council chamber on the Cathari homeworld, commanders argued. They are weak, one said. They are small. They bleed. They break. They cannot last against us. Another shook his head, voice trembling. No, they rise from the ashes. Every death makes them stronger. Every attack we make only teaches them. They are different. Terribly, terrifyingly different. A captured Cathari soldier, trembling and terrified, added what he had seen on the battlefield. We thought we understood them, but we do not. They do not fight like anything we have ever known. They do not fear. They do not bow. They do not stop. We cannot break them. Not with weapons. Not with fire. Not with death. That was the truth the Empire could not escape. Humans were more than flesh and bone. They were more than ships and weapons. They carried something no machine could measure: the unbreakable will to survive, and the courage to fight for everyone else as fiercely as for themselves. Across the galaxy, whispers of this revelation spread. Other species, slaves, allies, observers, watched humans rise again and again. They began to tell each other stories of Earth, of small blue planet people who could not be crushed, who could not be broken. The humans were becoming legends, a symbol that even the mightiest empire could not predict, could not control, could not conquer. The Cathari Emperor, facing reports of humans surviving impossible attacks, shaking off planetary bombardments and striking back with ingenuity and ferocity, realized something that chilled him to his core. The humans were not a species to dominate. They were a force to fear. They were unpredictable, unstoppable, and impossible to defeat with conventional methods. And that fear spread among the commanders. The arrogance that had guided the empire for millennia began to crumble. No one could predict what humans would do next. No one could anticipate how they would survive. No one could calculate the strength that came from hope, love, and unity. For the first time, the empire understood a simple, horrifying truth. Humans were dangerous because they could not be measured, they could not be broken, and they could not be defeated as long as they had each other. And across Earth, humans continued to rise, unaware of the terror they had inspired. Every day, every act of courage, every small victory reminded them and the universe that they were alive. And being alive meant something far more powerful than any weapon, any empire, or any fleet could ever destroy. The Cathari could attack their cities, kill their people, burn their forests, and destroy their fleets, but they could not destroy the fire inside humanity. And that fire was only growing. The humans were coming, not as scattered groups, not as fragile survivors, but as a united force. The fleets that once seemed small and weak now filled the skies above the Cathari homeworld. Ships built from human ingenuity, from stolen Cathari tech, and from Earth's limited resources now moved with precision, power, and purpose. Every vessel carried not just weapons but the determination of a species that refused to die quietly. The Cathari looked down upon their homeworld and felt something they had never felt before: fear. Their fleets, their legions, their weapons of mass destruction, nothing could stop the humans. Every attack they had launched had failed. Every plan had been anticipated, countered, or turned against them. And now the humans were not just defending, they were coming for the empire itself. On the streets of Earth, children watched live feeds of the approaching fleets. Parents held them close, whispering words of courage. Scientists monitored enemy systems, guiding pilots to weak points. Soldiers readied themselves, knowing the battle ahead would be terrible, but knowing also that they had survived worse. Humanity had been tested in fire, forged in grief, and tempered in hope. And now they were ready to strike. The first human ships entered Cathari orbit with precision. The battle was immediate and brutal. Cathari cruisers fired with deadly intent, but humans were faster, smarter, more unpredictable. They dodged, they feinted, they struck at weak points no one thought existed. Human ships sacrificed themselves to protect others, to draw fire, to create openings. Each loss was felt deeply, but each life lost only strengthened the resolve of those still fighting. On the ground, humans rallied their forces, preparing for any attack the Cathari could launch. Cities had been rebuilt from ruins, defenses strengthened by ingenuity, traps set for those who underestimated Earth's people. Humanity had become not just a fighting force, but a living, breathing symbol of defiance. The Cathari commanders were desperate. They sent their most powerful weapons, their deadliest fleets, their most ruthless soldiers. But every attack was countered. Every calculation failed. The humans were unpredictable. They adapted instantly. They turned despair into opportunity, weakness into strength, loss into power. The Cathari realized, too late, that this was not just a war they were losing. It was a war they could never win. A captured Cathari general spoke quietly to his emperor, voice trembling. They cannot be stopped. They do not fight for themselves alone. They fight for everyone, for each other. We cannot break them. Not now. Not ever. The emperor, who had ruled countless worlds, who had destroyed entire civilizations without mercy, felt a fear he had never known. For centuries, the galaxy had obeyed him. For centuries, the empire had crushed every resistance. But now he understood the terrible truth. Humans were not a species to conquer. Humans were a force the universe could not contain. And then in the skies above, a single message was broadcast from Earth to the galaxy. No one warned you about us. The words echoed through every corner of Cathari space. They were not a threat, they were a declaration, a reminder that the humans did not fear death, did not bow to empires, and did not surrender. They had fought impossible odds, survived annihilation, and now stood as a symbol of defiance the galaxy had never seen. On Earth, people cheered. They had lost loved ones, they had seen cities destroyed, but they were still alive. And in that survival, they had found power greater than any weapon. Across every world they had touched, humanity's fire spread, a blazing force of courage, hope, and unity. The Cathari retreated, their fleets shattered, their empire shaken, their arrogance broken. They had underestimated humans. They had assumed weakness meant defeat. But the humans had proven that true.